People say they want to be free. They post about it, read about it, dream about it. But the moment conflict shows up, as a disagreement, a confrontation, a line drawn in the sand, most people fold. They pull back. They choose silence, not because they're at peace, but because they're afraid. And that's the real reason so many remain trapped in limited lives. They think freedom is about avoiding discomfort, avoiding friction, keeping the waters calm. But that's not what freedom is. That's just self-imposed submission dressed up as maturity. If you want peace, buy a hammock. But if you want freedom, you better get ready for a fight. Freedom is not handed to you. No one gives up power willingly or quietly. No system, no person, no ideology that benefits from your compliance is ever going to clap while you step outside of their control. So when you say you want to be free mentally, emotionally, financially, politically, you're saying you're ready for war. Conflict is the path. It is not a detour. It's the toll you pay to escape the grip of others, to carve your own direction. Nietzsche knew this. He saw that evolution real. Enduring transformation only happens through struggle, through tension, through resistance. People forget, Nietzsche wasn't obsessed with comfort. He didn't preach harmony. He preached becoming, and becoming requires confrontation first with the world, and then with yourself. It's conflict that shatters illusion. It's conflict that burns away weakness. Most people fear it because they haven't faced themselves honestly enough to realize where they lack strength. So instead of sharpening their blade, they hide behind politeness, fake neutrality, and smiling silence. But make no mistake, avoiding conflict is a slow death of the self. Because every time you swallow truth to please others, every time you stay quiet to avoid friction, you're training yourself to value comfort over integrity. And that's exactly how people stay caged. Freedom doesn't come softly. It doesn't arrive with peace treaties and gentle encouragements. It requires you to say no when others want you to say yes. It demands you to set boundaries that some will hate you for. It insists that you become okay with being misunderstood, disliked, or even vilified, if that's the price for living on your terms. Conflict is often the proof that you're finally standing up for something real. Machiavelli understood this from another angle. He didn't believe the world was moved by idealism. He believed it was moved by force, by perception, by resolve. And nothing tests your resolve faster than conflict. Are you really willing to own who you are, stand on your decisions, reject manipulation, and walk away from the comfort of approval? You don't find out in theory. You find out the moment someone challenges you, the moment you're no longer liked, when people push back, when they try to guilt you or label you or isolate you. That's the test. And if you're afraid of that moment, you'll never be free, because that moment will always own you. We're conditioned from a young age to avoid conflict. Say what's polite. Don't argue. Keep the peace. But keeping their peace often means violating your own. And if you've built your life on keeping others comfortable, then you've never actually built your own life. You've just rented space inside someone else's expectations. That's not freedom. That's captivity wearing a friendly mask. So, why do most avoid conflict? Because something was programmed into them. The belief that life is easier when you're agreeable, that it's safer to be liked than it is to be true. But what's the cost of that safety? What dreams are being suffocated just so you don't rock the boat? What truth stays buried so nobody gets uncomfortable? And more importantly, who benefits from that silence? Anytime you're afraid of conflict, ask yourself who gets stronger because you backed down. Usually, it's someone who needed you to behave in a smaller way. someone scared of your strength, or a system that depends on obedience to maintain its illusion of order. But freedom, the authentic, unfiltered, uncomfortable kind, only begins the moment you stop fearing that discomfort. The moment you realize that conflict isn't the enemy, it's the portal. What most people call peace is just postponed resentment. A temporary stillness that eventually explodes because truth was never spoken. But if you want real freedom, you speak up even when your voice shakes. You confront even when it makes people flinch. You move forward even when the road is burning, because that's where freedom lives, on the other side of everything you were terrified to face. Peace is comfortable, but freedom has a cost, and the price is conflict. It's easy to believe that avoiding conflict makes you wise, that staying silent keeps you safe, that being agreeable is the path to getting along, staying liked, and surviving in a world full of strong opinions and sharp edges. But here's the truth that most people never admit to themselves: avoiding conflict doesn't make you safe. It makes you controllable. If you flinch every time tension rises, you are predictable. And in a world where power flows to those who understand behavior, predictability is weakness. The person who can't tolerate disagreement is exactly the person who's easiest to manipulate. All someone needs to do is show disapproval, raise their voice, push back, and you fold. That's not peacekeeping, that's submission. People think they're keeping the peace, but what they're really doing is handing over control. When you avoid conflict to keep relationships intact, to preserve your reputation, to be liked by your job, your family, your friends, what you're doing, often subconsciously, is making yourself small enough to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. You shrink your opinions, dilute your truth, smooth over your own edges, not because you don't know what you believe, but because you're afraid of what believing fully might cost you. But let's ask the real question: who profits when you're afraid of conflict? The answer is simple: those who want you quiet, those who thrive off your compliance, those who keep their position as long as you never push back. Systems of control, whether in institutions, authority structures, or even personal relationships, are built not just on force, but on your willingness to stay agreeable. Fear of conflict becomes the leash, and the moment you believe it's safer to bite your tongue than speak your mind, the leash tightens. Machiavelli never hid this truth. He believed that power depends on perception. It depends on fear. And when ruling over others, whether in kingdoms or boardrooms, one of the most effective tools is not violence, it's managing behavior. And nothing manages behavior faster than the threat of discomfort. If you can get people to silence themselves out of fear of friction, you never need to silence them yourself. They'll do the work for you and call it being polite. Now, Nietzsche comes at it differently but lands in a similar place. His obsession wasn't power over others, it was power over oneself. And from his view, avoiding conflict, especially internal conflict, was weak. He saw the will to power as essential, the drive in each of us that demands we break conformity, challenge the herd, and embrace the struggle that forges real freedom. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how, he said. But how can you ever find your why if you're constantly burying it to keep the how easy? You can't. You trade your purpose for approval, then wonder why you feel empty. Avoiding conflict sounds smart in the short term. You avoid the argument, the fallout, the awkward moment, but long term, avoiding conflict reshapes your life into something unrecognizable. There's a piece of you that dies every time you lie just to smooth things over. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, or worse. Every time you say nothing when your entire being is screaming to speak. That's the slow erosion of the soul. Not punishment, not oppression, just voluntary silence over and over until you forget what your own voice sounds like. What makes this so dangerous is that conflict avoidance becomes a pattern, and like all patterns, it becomes identity. You stop recognizing yourself as someone with clear boundaries. You start identifying as the peacemaker, the helper, the one who doesn't rock the boat. People learn this about you. They learn that if they push, you'll retreat. If they press, you'll fold. You start attracting the very kinds of people who thrive off this dynamic, the ones who take, who overstep, who dominate. And at some point, you look around and realize you don't recognize the life you're living. The relationships you're in aren't built on truth, they're built on your silence. Your career isn't shaped by what you wanted, it's shaped by what you never challenged. Your identity becomes shaped not by who you are, but by how afraid you've been to be seen. But here's the key. The ability to engage with conflict is not about being aggressive, hostile, or difficult. It's not about chasing drama for its own sake. It's about being solid, grounded enough in yourself that disagreement doesn't scare you. It's about knowing that having a different opinion, drawing a boundary, or saying no without apology isn't violence, it's sovereignty. When you stop fearing conflict, you begin acting from truth instead of from fear. You stop letting the mood in the room dictate who you get to be. That's when you get real freedom. Not because the world suddenly accepts you, but because it no longer owns you. Power begins the moment you stop being afraid to challenge what tries to contain you. Most people think of conflict as something external. A disagreement, a fight, an argument across a table. But the most important kind of conflict isn't between people. It's between you and the version of yourself that's still afraid to be real. And the longer you avoid that conflict, the longer you walk around not knowing who you are. Nietzsche understood this at a level most people aren't ready to face. He didn't glorify struggle because it sounded poetic. He saw it as essential. For Nietzsche, becoming who you really are, your highest self, doesn't happen on a quiet, easy path. It happens through violence, not physical violence, but internal war. The friction between comfort and truth, between the life you tolerate and the life that would set you free. Conflict isn't just something you encounter on the road to self-mastery. It is the road. Most people run from conflict because they think it's destructive, but they're wrong. Avoiding conflict is what destroys you in the end. Because when you refuse to disagree, to tension your beliefs against others, to challenge what's being imposed on you, you never really learn where you stand. You just absorb whatever narrative is loudest, most popular, or least likely to get you rejected. You become a reflection of others' expectations. And slowly, you lose yourself not in one dramatic moment, but in 1,000 small silences. True conflict is clarifying. You learn what you actually believe when someone pushes back. You find out which values stick when you're under pressure to let them go. This is why people avoid the argument, not because they hate the noise, but because deep down they aren't sure they can withstand it. Not sure their position holds up, not sure their identity is rooted in something solid. So they fall quiet, dress it up as choosing peace, and stay trapped inside a version of themselves they never chose. It was just the most agreeable one available. Conflict shows you where you're vague, soft, conveniently indecisive. It shines a spotlight on every weak boundary, every untested assumption, every story you've told yourself to sleep better at night. It forces you to examine what you defend and what you're willing to compromise. The Machiavellian mindset sees this not as chaos, but as necessary excavation. If you're serious about building power, you have to know your own structure. And there's no better way to test a structure than to apply pressure. Conflict is pressure. Think about it. How do you know someone is loyal? You don't learn that in calm moments. You find out when tension hits, when stakes rise. How do you know you're respected? Not when they're praising you, but when you challenge them and they still stand beside you. And how do you know your values, your principles, your personal truth? By watching which lines you're willing to draw and keep when someone tries to walk over them. The truth is, people hate conflict because it puts their identity on trial. It shoves their beliefs into light. And if there's weakness in those beliefs, the conflict will crack it wide open. But that's the exact point. That's not failure. That's transformation. That's the beginning of something stronger, realer, more you than the fragile version that couldn't survive tension. Nietzsche believed we must become who we are, but first, we must burn away everything that we are not asterisk. And nothing does that faster than confrontation. It's not always loud, either. Some of the deepest conflicts are dead silent. The choice to end a relationship instead of dragging it along. The decision to start over when the life you've built starts to feel like a mask. The moment you stop agreeing with something that used to define you, and now it feels like a cage. These aren't battles you fight with others. They're between you and the part of you that just wants to stay safe, the part that loves routine, predictability, approval. But freedom only arrives when you say, enough. When you stop negotiating with lies. When you walk straight into the confrontation in your job, your relationships, your own mind, not because you enjoy pain, but because you know what's on the other side. A self that isn't diluted. A voice that doesn't stutter. A life that wasn't settled for, but claimed. Without conflict, you stay soft. You blend in. You act like you agree more than you do. You say it's fine when it's not. And you call it maturity because rebellion would take more courage than you're comfortable with. But the longer you do that, the louder the conflict inside you grows. And eventually, one of two things happens. You collapse under the weight of what you never said, or you rise because you finally had the courage to confront everything that was keeping you quiet. Conflict is not what breaks you. It's what reveals you. Power doesn't respond to silence. It doesn't recognize politeness or agreeableness or your ability to stay calm while being ignored, dismissed, or disrespected. Power responds to presence, to people who stand their ground, who look you in the eye and don't flinch. It respects those who refuse to shrink to make others more comfortable, who don't bend just to avoid tension. And it always recognizes the difference between someone trying to be liked and someone who demands to be respected. This is the distinction most people never make. They spend their lives trying to be liked by their peers, their boss, their community, their audience, thinking that if they stay likable, they'll be safe. But safety doesn't come from being liked. Safety comes from being impossible to ignore, from holding your posture even when the room turns cold, from becoming someone who signals, without saying a word, that you cannot be moved without consequences. Machiavelli observed this clearly. He said it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. And not because fear is more noble, but because fear is more reliable. Respect, he knew, is not built from being agreeable. It's built from being formidable, from having the courage to say what others avoid, to draw lines where others erase them, and to act even when it disrupts the mood. That's what people actually respond to, because deep down, everyone can sense authority, not the kind granted by titles, but the kind forged by self-ownership. The reality is, when you stay soft and silent, hoping others see your value, You put your dignity in their hands. You make your worth something others have to acknowledge for it to exist at all. But people only value what they're forced to respect. And respect has a cost. It requires you to be okay with not being liked, especially by people who benefit from your compliance. It demands that you accept the discomfort of being seen as harsh, arrogant, even ruthless, when the truth is, those are just words people use to describe someone they're afraid to manipulate. This is where most people back down. The second things get tense. The minute someone labels them difficult, they retreat. They want to prove they're kind, agreeable, understanding, and maybe they are. But in the eyes of power, all that matters is this. Will you hold the line when it gets uncomfortable? Will you demand respect even when it costs you popularity? Or will you fold to stay in everyone's good graces? Because if you're willing to fold, people will always find a way to bend you. What we need to understand is this: the world isn't fair. It doesn't operate on good intentions. It rewards strength, the strength to own space without apology, to disrupt when silence is no longer survivable, to confront when everyone around you is busy keeping the peace. And again, this doesn't mean being aggressive for the sake of it. It doesn't mean walking around picking fights or demanding control. It means having the inner discipline to be unmoved by emotion, calm in fire, still but unshakable. That's what intimidates people. Not noise, presence, focus, clarity. The kind of stillness that comes from someone who's fought themselves and won. Nietzsche spoke of the individual who has gone through the chaos and emerged stronger, not because they avoided conflict, but because they became something through it. Someone who commands respect not by screaming it, but by embodying it. That individual doesn't chase approval. They don't fear opposition, and because of that, their power expands, because nothing outside them holds dominion over their behavior. Not popularity, not praise, not backlash, that's what makes someone free, and power always respects the free. And yet, most have been taught the opposite, that love is everything, that being accepted is more important than being asserted. And look, if your goal is to blend in, to keep life simple, stay silent. Nod when others speak. Soften your words. Make people comfortable. But if your goal is to lead, to rise, to create, to live on your own terms, you need to let go of the dream that everyone will like you. Because not everyone will. The more truth you carry, the more it will offend the insecure. The more grounded you become, the more it will threaten the unsteady. But that is not your problem to fix. That's their problem to face. Your only job is to stop apologizing for standing firm, to stop diluting who you are to make unsteady people feel comfortable. Because those who truly hold power never ask you to shrink. They meet you where you are, or they step back. If you want real power, stop chasing approval and start demanding respect.